What's up, guys? Today I have a completely different video for my channel. Today I am just curious as a cat and decided that I wanted to look at 4 different serial killers and what they had in common. Like what are these horrible monsters? What links them? Can you figure out these types of people? And so I just went on this whole mission to figure out who these people are, what their background stories are, to kind of see the similarities. My mom is addicted. No matter what time of the day, she is watching unsolved, solved cases, trials. At 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the TV is playing some type of crime show. I grew up listening, hearing, talking about crime cases. Don't talk to strangers. Don't go anywhere by yourself. Just everything. This isn't new to me completely, but it's definitely new for my channel. So hopefully you like this. I actually want to start a series about true crime. I came up with the name Captured Killers. So I kind of want to do solved crime versus the unsolved. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing so you can see more videos like this. So let's just dive right in. We're going to be reviewing 4 different serial killers today, and I pick these basically by going onto Google, typing in top serial killers, and then it brought up, these were the first 4 names on the list. Are these the most prolific killers? That's questionable. Prolific in my mind just equals monster, horrible person, criminal, killer, all the bad things. So we are going to be reviewing Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or Milwaukee Monster. John Wayne Gacy, which is the killer clown. Gary Ridgeway. Holy moly. He's the Green River Killer. And then, of course, the infamous Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy doesn't have like a serial killer name. What's up with that? But when you hear Ted Bundy, you hear pure evil. Ted Bundy doesn't need one. He speaks for himself. Basically, I'm just going to be reviewing just the basic information from each of them just to do a comparison. I'll put all 4 on the screen. I have my notes down here, so if I'm looking down, that's why. Jeffrey Dahmer, he was born May 21st, 1960, which makes him a Gemini. John Wayne Gacy was born March 17th, 1942, and he is a Pisces. Gary Ridgway was born February 18th of 49, and he is an Aquarius. Ted Bundy, November 24th, 1946. He's a Sagittarius. So all of these men are white males. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in Wisconsin, and all of his crimes were committed in the Wisconsin area. John Wayne Gacy, Illinois. He was born in Illinois, and most of his crimes were in Illinois, if not all of them. Gary Ridgway was born in Utah, but most of his crimes were committed in Washington. There's a few that he took over the border in Oregon, but for the most part, it was Washington. Ted Bundy, he got around. He was born in Vermont, but him and his mom moved to Pennsylvania with the grandparents. Most of his crimes were done in Washington. Now, he got around though. He was known to commit murders in Washington, Oregon, California, Utah, and Florida. So he got around. So what I find interesting about these 4 men is that most of their crimes, like they had committed crimes prior to their serial killings, raped somebody or been convicted of something. When they started on their serial killings was around the age 27 to 33. Jeffrey Dahmer was 27 years old. John Wayne Gacy was 30 years old. Ridgeway was 33 years old. And Bundy was 28 years old. Around that late 20s, early 30s is when it really got intense for all four of these serial killers. It's so close in age. So let's talk about military. Were any of these men in the military? And Jeffrey Dahmer was in the military, but he got discharged because he was a raging alcoholic. So he got discharged, didn't complete it. Gacy, no. Gary Ridgway, yes. He actually completed the military. And then Ted Bundy, no. He was never in the military at all. Married. Okay, so everybody was married except for Dahmer. Dahmer was never married. He never had any children as well. He really didn't have any long-term relationships that I could find. And that doesn't mean that they never happened. I just couldn't find any like long-term boyfriend. It just seemed like that just didn't happen. Yeah, I found that interesting that he just never held down like a serious relationship for a long time. Whereas the other three all had been married. Gacy had 2 children, Gary Ridgway had 1 child, and Ted Bundy had 1 child. Religious. Were these gentlemen religious or no? And Dahmer, I could see that religion was in his life and he went to church with his grandma, but in general, I don't think that he was a religious person. Like, I don't think he was going around preaching or a religious type person. He did get baptized. I don't know. I don't think he was religious. John Wayne Gacy was religious. He was actually Catholic. And then Gary Ridgway was the most religious. He was really going around preaching and really got into going to church and religion. And so of all of them, I think that he was the most religious. And Ted Bundy, he got baptized in prison, but I don't see him as a religious person. I never really heard a lot about him being religious from the research that I did. Have you ever heard of the McDonald triad? So this is a method that Dr. McDonald created. He created it in 1960 where he was basically profiling serial killers. The triad, the 3 things that he said were most common in a serial killer is that there's bedwetting, fires, they've set fires, arson, and they have been cruel to animals, animal cruelty, animal killings. I wanted to compare these 3 to use that method. Now, this method has been proven not to be a good way to determine. So, and as you'll see in my research, I really didn't see that this method is accurate at all. So Dahmer, I could not find any history of him bedwetting or setting fires, but he was definitely one who was cruel to animals. He loved picking up roadkill. He liked dissecting them. He had a whole shed, a whole little area, a little man cave where he could cut up animals. Very, very bad. And then we have John Wayne Gacy. I couldn't find any bedwetting. I couldn't find any fires. And from what I seen, there was one report that said that he put balloons in rabbits' butts that were filled with gasoline. I don't know if that's true or not, but he had animals. So I seen him more of an animal lover than one that hurt animals. So I'm going to say no for him as well. Gary Ridgway, yes to everything. He wet the bed until he was like 13. I can't remember exact age, but he was an older child. Set fires, and he was cruel to animals. So fit the profile there. Ted Bundy had bedwetting, no fires, and was cruel to animals. I think the cruelty to animals is the most significant. That comes up in a lot of serial killers. Like, let's talk about their parents. Jeffrey Dahmer's parents were married. They divorced in the year 1977, just when Dahmer turned 17. And he committed his first crime not too long after that when he was 18. Doesn't mean anything, maybe not, but I just found it interesting that it wasn't long after his parents' divorce that he actually committed his first killing. That was his first kill, but not when he started his whole serial killings. John Wayne Gacy, his parents were married. Gary Ridgway, his parents were married. And Ted Bundy, mom was unwed mother, so she was not married. They ended up moving in with his grandparents, and he referred to his grandparents as mom and dad, and his mom as his sister. And then they moved, and then she became his mother. Very, very confusing for a child. Very confusing. But she ended up marrying a gentleman, and so Ted Bundy had a stepfather. The relationship that each of them had with their parents. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer had a horrible relationship with his parents. He was said to be neglected. There was a lot of tension and fighting going on in the house. And then Jeffrey Dahmer also, in high school, started his drinking, was drinking heavily. And I've heard that that has some impact on your later years if you start really young drinking, but it could be other things as well. I just wrote that down as an interesting fact of his younger years. He started, heavily drinking. John Wayne Gacy, his father was very cruel to him. He would say degrading things to him, and he was physically violent with him. He was an alcoholic himself. He just sounded like Dad was not a great person. Mom, on the other hand, he had a good relationship with her. His father would actually give him a hard time about it, calling him a mama's boy. Nevertheless, also in his younger years, growing up, he was molested by a family friend. His relationship with his father was so bad that he didn't want to tell about this friend because he felt like he would be abused for it, calling him a sissy boy, and he probably liked it, yada, yada, yada. So he just never said anything about it because of that relationship, which is unfortunate. Gary Ridgway, his mother was something special. Now, he had abuse in his family from both parents, but mom would walk around the house in sexual clothes and almost try to be a sexual figure to her children. And because he was such a bedwetter, that she would get angry with him and immediately put him into the bathtub, but then she would clean his genital area in a way that aroused him. And so then she would make fun of him for being aroused. So whether she did it on purpose or it just happened, you'll never know. So it just seemed like he was frustrated with his mom because he had sexual feelings towards her, but also hated her. What a weird dynamic. As far as parents, I kind of got into it about Ted Bundy, where he called his grandparents mom and dad, and then moved, and then called his mom, and then he had this stepdad that he really didn't respect. He thought he was of lower class and he wasn't educated, and so he would give him a hard time. Bundy just didn't have a good relationship with his stepfather because he didn't respect him. But other than that, I couldn't find out any other information about Ted's relationship with his parents. Just based on the information of his mom and his grandparents and that whole dynamic, it just seemed like it was just a confusing time for little Ted. Let's talk about IQs. I find this so interesting. Maybe you guys don't, but these IQs of these serial killers is just phenomenal. Jeffrey Dahmer had an IQ of 145. He was considered by an IQ standard a genius. Gary Ridgway had a very high average IQ at 118. Ted Bundy, once again, he was tested with an IQ of 136, but then retested and he tested at 144, which is a genius level. Gary Ridgway, on the other hand, his IQ was only 81, 82. He was the lowest IQ of all the serial killers, but his meticulous attention to detail and his street smarts were just phenomenal. He is the one that scares me the most out of all of these, honestly. And I'll get into that more later, but he was very, very street smart and really was meticulous with things. So although his IQ wasn't high, he had something going on there where he was a smart cookie. Number of victims. Okay, so let's talk about how many victims each of these had. These are only convicted victims. I want to say that there is more in every one of these. I almost guarantee that there is more. They're going off of memory, like how many times you got your nails done. I mean, that's kind of how you can compare it to, or how many times did you go to the grocery store last year? They just don't remember. It's just something that they did, and they racked up numbers and can't remember all their victims. It's sad, it's disgusting, but it's the truth of the matter because they can never say for sure how many victims. Dahmer is said to have killed 17 victims. Gary Ridgway had 33 plus. Gary Ridgway had 49, although he confessed to 71. Ted Bundy, 36, could be over 100. We'll never know. He really did get around, so it's hard to say exactly how many. The amount of killings that happened by these men. The types of victims that each one had. These 4 men were just picked at random by me. I showed you earlier, but I found it really interesting how different their victims were because each one of these had a very specific type. Dahmer liked late teen, early 20 boys, men. Before he went to jail for, I think it was sodomy case or a molestation case, and spent a year in jail. Before he went into jail, he was just killing any boy he could get his hands on. Late teens, early 20s was still men. They were all men. But after he got out of jail, he specifically went after African American males. Why? What happened in jail, I wonder? But he went specifically after African American after he got out of jail. And then we move on to Mr. Gacy, and he liked teenage boys. Specifically, although there was some early 20s, but for the most part, he liked the teenage boys. Very, very sick man. Gary Ridgway liked sex workers, women. He liked them late teens, early 20s. It was just specifically sex workers. He has been known to not like sex workers, that he despised them. So I don't know if it was because he actually despised them or because they were easy targets. We'll never know. Ted Bundy liked college girls who part their hair in the middle. You probably heard about Ted Bundy through documentaries, different YouTube videos, shows, episodes, documentaries. I mean, Ted Bundy is everywhere. I don't know why. I guess I do know why. He was an attractive man, and so he got a lot of press. But Ridgway was way worse than him. I didn't even know who Ridgeway was until I started this. I had heard his name, but I really didn't know what a bad dude he was. Ted Bundy had a girlfriend in college that broke his heart. She was everything that he wasn't. He loved her, and she broke it off with him. And so whether it is or isn't true, but he went after his victims based on this relationship that he got his heart broken, or it was just his type. They all looked like this gal that broke his heart. So they all had their hair parted, darker, long hair. So he loved the college students, and he loved the Caucasian, early 20s, long-haired gals. I kind of skipped over one. Did they graduate from high school and did they go to college? What's interesting about that is they had a lot of these, except for Gary Ridgway, all had very high IQs. And Dahmer didn't, he graduated high school, but he did not go to college. He went for a semester, and because of his drinking, he was not successful in college and ended up dropping out. Gary Ridgway ended up graduating high school. No, he didn't graduate high school. He dropped out, but then was accepted to college. So that's I guess that just represents the time where there wasn't a lot of documents that were floating back and forth, but he didn't graduate, but he graduated from college. Gary Ridgway did not go to college, but he did graduate. And Ted Bundy, yes to both. He ended up going to college. He was accepted to law school, but never went. Another big one that comes up that I think should be part of this whole McDonald triad is head trauma, because it comes up in so many serial killers. Like, a lot of them. Ramirez, I could go on and on of all of these serial killers that had some kind of head trauma in their life. They later grew up and became criminals. It's interesting. Dahmer, I couldn't find any head traumas. John Wayne Gacy had 2 incidents when he was 6 years old. He was hit by a broom and it knocked him unconscious, gave him a concussion. And then when he was 11, he got hit with a swing. That caused like future blackouts. Like, he had issues with blackouts after that. But what's interesting about that is they did a study of his brain after he died, and they said it was a normal brain. They couldn't find anything off with it. But the brain is definitely, it's a territory we have not mastered yet. So there's a lot of mystery that goes on in the brain. So they're studying a brain that's not firing. It's a dead brain. And so they're just looking for it as far as like having a tumor or things like that. And he didn't have anything like that. They couldn't find any damage. Gary Ridgway, I couldn't find any head trauma with him either. For Ted Bundy, yes, he had head trauma. When he was 6, he was hit so hard that it knocked out his teeth. Crazy. And then also, that was when he was 6. And then when he was 7, he fell off a pony and got a concussion from that. I guess of the 4, it's only 2 out of 4. But I'm telling you that a lot of these serial killers had some head trauma. I didn't realize that 2 of these did not have head trauma. Another known fact about serial killers is that necrophilia is very common. And necrophiliac is when they have sex with a dead body. All 4 of them did this. It was said that they would go back to their victims, and after they killed them and have sex with them, they would return to the scene until they're too decomposed. Gary Ridgway would take his girlfriends to the area because he liked to have sex in public where one of the victims was, or a couple of the victims. He would return to the spot and have sex with his partner, his girlfriend, his wife at the time. Jeffrey Dahmer, he would just kind of hang out with his victims. He would put them in the chair and just have them hang out with him, talk about his day. And then Ted Bundy, of course, he would go back to the scene, to his victims, and have necrophilia with his victims. I once worked when I first graduated, I worked on critical care and telemetry, and I had to clean the bodies. Now, I got out of it. I worked there for probably 2 years. I got out of it every time by either saying I have to go home sick, or I would make up excuses. It was a running joke on the floor that as soon as something happens and I need to clean someone up that has passed, I am like done. But there was this one day I couldn't get out of it. This nurse said, I'm going to help you through it. You need to get over this and you need to do it. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll do it. So she was with me the whole time. We cleaned this body up and then we had to take him down to the morgue. I'm shaking. I'm scared. I'm freaking out, even though I'm not alone, because typically this is a job that I would do by myself. I worked third shift, mind you. And so that's when a lot of people passed, and working on critical care and telemetry wasn't unheard of. And so we went down to the morgue, and it was the first time that I had been down there, other than just like peeking in the door. This time I had to roll the body all the way into the thing, and that door behind us slammed so hard, I almost peed my pants. I freaked out, and the nurse was like, it's okay, the door just shuts hard. And I'm like, get me out of here, and I'm never doing this again. So the fact that they did this just is just to the core of me. How? I don't know how. Sorry, that was a super side note. It has nothing to do with these guys, but I just find it interesting anyways. So, what was their method of killing these victims? This is gory, and I'm sorry, but it's crazy, because for the most part, they all strangled their victims. Ted Bundy would beat his victims to death. Jeffrey Dahmer would drug his victims, and then he would strangle them. And then John Wayne Gacy, he of course strangled his victims. And Gary Ridgway, he would manually strangle his victims, but then they would fight back his hand, he's choking them. They would scratch and cut his arms. And so he decided that manual wasn't the way to go because he was getting injured. And so he switched up his method and used their clothing, a belt, something, but it was generally strangling. Ted shot some of his victims, so he would like to beat them, shoot them, strangle them. Only one remains alive, and that is Gary Ridgway. Ted Bundy was executed in 1989. John Wayne Gacy was executed in 1994. And Jeffrey Dahmer was actually murdered in jail by another inmate in 1994. Although I'm pretty sure he would have been dead by execution, this inmate also killed another person in jail as well. So Gary Ridgway actually had a lot of victims and a lot that weren't accounted for. And so he made a plea deal to give up some of his victims and not be put on death row to keep them alive. And he did help find a lot of victims and be able to tell these families, be able to ease the mind of the loved ones of these victims. Although I feel like he deserved death row, I think easing the mind of a lot of these families was also valuable. Ted Bundy had the opportunity to make a plea deal the same as Ridgway, but Ted Bundy actually turned it down. And so he was on death row for 9 years because he later said, I'm going to help you find victims. And so he prolonged it for as long as he could. Ted Bundy also helped with the Gary Ridgway case by giving him advice on what he thinks he's doing and how they could catch him. And Ted Bundy said he will return to the victim's site. So when you find a body, just hang out there because he's gonna return to perform necrophilia or ejaculate or see the victim again, but he'll go back to relive it. It didn't really help them to catch him, but it did help them probably with others. I don't know if it helped him or didn't help him. It just seems like he wasn't caught immediately with the help of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy did not help them capture him. He just, being a serial killer, he knows a serial killer's mind and was offering some assistance, probably for his own benefit because he was on death row and he was trying to prolong it for as long as he could. Oh, what I was going to talk about is that of all of these serial killers, Gary Ridgway, the one that's still alive, this guy was a chameleon. He is not like the typical serial killer. And I can do a whole video about him because I don't think he's as public. Maybe it's just me, but you know, Ted Bundy, Dahmer, the clown killer, you know, you hear about them a lot. But Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, I didn't really know much about him, but once I learned about him, he was your family guy. He was your church goer. He was he had a steady job. You know, he had worked the same job for like 20 something years. Like, this guy on the outside looked like he had his shit together, but come to find out, he was murdering several, tons, so many women. His victims are upwards of 71 that he admitted to. That's so many victims. And because he was just not an outstanding guy, he was just kind of like I don't want to say normal, because what's normal, but he was just a sub-average guy. Like, he didn't seem like he was doing too much in the world. He got married, he went to work, he drove his truck, he had a son. I mean, it just seemed like he was an all-American, just typical guy, but come to find out, he's just really, really bad. That's the type of person that scares me. Although Ted Bundy, he had something special about him, because, so the girlfriend that I talked about, where all of his victims look like, he actually got back with her. Like, she seen he was doing well, and so they called and hooked up or whatever. She was lonely, whatever happened. And he led her on and proposed to her just to break up with her so she could feel the same way that he did when she broke up with him. That takes a special kind of person to be able to do that, to disassociate yourself so much that you're able just to carry on this "I love you, will you marry me," and buying a ring and getting somebody all excited just to break up with them. Clearly, he was a special kind of guy, but I'm just like, wow, I think I've dated people like that. No, I'm just kidding. If you want me to do any individual cases of any of these, please leave it down in the comments. I plan on doing a series to review, or to go review like it's makeup. Oh, no. To talk about these serial killers and, you know, how they got their victims, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in a full video on any of these, I have the tea on all of them. Let me tell you, I've watched so many videos. I have studied. I've read tons of articles about these gentlemen, more than I needed to know. So that is everything that I have written down. So let me know what you think of these cases. I find them very interesting. The backstory just very interesting. And maybe it's just me. I don't know. You guys let me know down below. So that's all I got today. Thanks so much for watching, especially if you made it this long. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in my next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.